Hello, buddies. My name is Walter Hayes. I'm 72 years old, and for most of my life I believed one simple thing without question, that if a man gives everything he has to his family, that family will never turn their back on him. I was wrong. The day I learned that lesson, I was standing in my daughter's living room with my arms stretched out, waiting to hold my first grandchild. And before my hands ever touched that baby, my daughter looked at me and said words that still echo in my head. Words that ended everything. But before I take you there, let me say this. If you're listening right now, leave a comment and tell me where you're listening from. What city, what state? At my age, knowing someone out there is hearing my voice. It matters more than you might think. And if this story reminds you of someone you love or someone you've lost, a simple like or share might help this reach the right person at the right time. I never thought I'd be telling a story like this. I've lived a long life, worked hard, kept my head down, did what a man is supposed to do. I wasn't perfect, but I was present. I showed up, and I believed that counted for something. That morning, I woke up earlier than usual. The sun hadn't fully come up yet, and the house was quiet in that deep way only an old house gets. I made myself a cup of coffee, took 2 sips, then left it on the table untouched. My stomach was too tight for anything warm. I stood in front of the mirror longer than I normally would, not because I wanted to look impressive, but because I didn't want to look careless. I wanted to look like I belonged in my daughter's life. I chose a clean sweater, one my daughter Lauren had given me years ago. I remember thinking maybe she'll recognize it, maybe it'll remind her of us. I packed a small gift bag, nothing loud, nothing expensive. A soft blanket, a couple of toys, things you buy when you don't want to intrude, only to be welcomed. The drive over felt longer than it should have. Same road I'd driven dozens of times, but every red light felt heavier that day. I kept telling myself, Walter, don't bring your worries inside. Today is about joy. When I pulled up to the house, I didn't get out right away. I sat there with my hands on the steering wheel, breathing slowly, like a man about to step into something sacred. This was the house I had helped them buy. The house I believed I could always walk into. I picked up the gift bag and rang the bell. Lauren opened the door. She didn't smile. I told myself she was tired. New baby, sleepless nights. I'd made excuses for her my whole life. I wasn't about to stop now. Inside, the house smelled like milk and laundry detergent and exhaustion. I saw the bassinet in the living room, right there in the open, like it was placed deliberately in the center of everything. My heart tightened. Lauren lifted the baby gently. I felt my voice drop without thinking, the way it does when something fragile is near. I stepped closer, slowly, carefully. I reached my arms out, not rushing, not demanding, just waiting. And that's when everything changed. After I walked out of that house, I didn't start the car right away. I just sat there. My hands were still resting in my lap, and for a strange moment it felt like my arms were still raised, frozen in the air the way they had been inside. I stared at the steering wheel, not angry, not crying, just empty. Like something important had been quietly removed from my chest without asking. I didn't turn on the radio. I didn't want noise. Her words were already loud enough. The drive home felt unfamiliar, even though I knew every turn. Houses passed by like they always had, lights on, curtains half drawn, people living their normal lives. It amazed me how the world could keep moving when something inside you had just cracked. When I got home, I unlocked the door, stepped inside, and stood there longer than usual. The house greeted me with its usual sounds, the refrigerator humming, the clock ticking in the living room. Everything was exactly where it had always been. That was the strange part. Nothing had changed, and yet nothing felt the same. I set my keys down in the small ceramic dish by the door. I'd had that dish longer than I could remember. Lauren's mother picked it out years ago, back when life still felt full and forward-moving. I hadn't had the heart to replace it. I walked into the living room and sat down in my old armchair, the one with the worn armrests shaped perfectly to my elbows. The lamp beside it cast a soft, yellow glow across the floor, and on the shelf across from me sat a photograph. Me and Lauren. She was maybe 6 years old in that picture. Her hair pulled back too tight, smiling wide, sitting on my shoulders at a summer fair. I remember that day clearly. She'd been scared to climb up, said she might fall. I told her I wouldn't let go. I kept that promise. Staring at that photo, something deep in my chest stirred and memories came rushing in, memories I hadn't visited in a long time. I didn't grow up with much. My parents weren't cruel, but they were exhausted. We lived in a small house where the walls were thin and the winters felt colder inside than outside. Money was always short. Every request had the same answer. We can't afford it. Shoes got worn until the soles were thin. School trips were skipped. When the roof leaked, my mother put a basin under it and told me to empty it when it filled up. That was just how life worked. I learned early not to ask for much. I started working young. Not for pocket money, for survival. Newspaper routes before sunrise. Washing cars on weekends. Carrying trays in a diner kitchen so hot your clothes stuck to your skin. I'd come home tired, count my small paycheck at the table, and slide it into an envelope without complaint. Even back then, I made myself a promise. I would never live my life hearing "not enough" forever. And when Lauren was born, that promise hardened into something permanent. I remember holding her in the hospital, wrapped in a white blanket, her face small and pink, eyes closed like the world hadn't touched her yet. I looked down at her and felt something shift inside me. I told myself she would never grow up the way I did. She would never hear, "We can't afford it," if I could help it. From that day on, everything I did was for her. I worked longer hours, took jobs others didn't want, construction during the day, warehouse shifts at night. Some evenings I sat in my car outside the house for a few minutes, forehead resting on the steering wheel, just gathering enough strength to walk inside and smile like nothing was wrong. I didn't travel, didn't buy things for myself, didn't complain. Any extra money went into envelopes with her name on them. Education, emergencies, living expenses, I thought that was love. I sat in the middle rows at her school events, clapping louder than anyone else. I stood on the sidelines at soccer games until my voice went hoarse. I sat with her at the kitchen table every night helping with homework, pouring her a warm glass of milk when she came home upset. I wasn't a man of big words. I showed love by showing up. And sitting there in my quiet living room, staring at that old photo, a realization settled over me like a heavy blanket. I had given my daughter everything, but somewhere along the way, I had taught her something I never intended to. I had taught her that I would always be there, no matter how I was treated. And that lesson had finally come due. When Lauren grew older and left for college, I thought I had done my job. That's what people tell you anyway. They say once your child grows up, your role changes. You step back, you let them live. You watch from a distance, but I never really stepped back. When Lauren called saying tuition was higher than expected, I didn't hesitate. I sent the money. When books cost more than planned, I covered it. When she sounded stressed, I told her not to worry, that she should focus on her studies. I believed a father's job was to remove obstacles, not become one. I still remember graduation day clearly. I sat in the middle row wearing a shirt I bought just for that occasion. When Lauren walked across the stage, confident and smiling, I clapped until my palms burned. I felt proud in a way that made my chest ache. When she hugged me afterward, it was quick, polite. Then she turned back to her friends. I told myself that was normal. That's when Ethan entered her life. The first time I met him, he was respectful, firm handshake, looked me in the eye, called me sir. He wasn't rude, not at all, but there was something distant about him. Like he was always standing half a step back, watching, calculating. He didn't ask much about me, didn't linger. Conversation stayed short. He answered questions politely, then looked toward Lauren as if waiting for her to guide things forward. I told myself it was generational. Young men are different, I thought. Less talkative, more private. When they started planning the wedding, Lauren wanted something beautiful. Not extravagant, but beautiful still costs money. I looked at her face, that same hopeful look she had as a child, and I nodded. I paid for most of it. The venue, the reception, the music, the flowers. I even added extra so they could take the honeymoon Lauren had dreamed about for years. I didn't want her looking back and feeling like her day was lacking. On the wedding day, she looked radiant. Ethan stood beside her, smiling at guests, one hand resting lightly on her back. I raised my glass and gave a simple toast. Nothing dramatic, just words from a father who wanted his daughter happy. At one point during the reception, Lauren glanced at me from across the room. Our eyes met for a second. Then she looked away. I didn't think much of it. A year later, the phone rang again. They wanted to buy a house. Lauren's voice carried excitement mixed with anxiety. The prices were higher than expected. Ethan suggested waiting a few years. Lauren didn't want to wait. She wanted stability, space, a future. I asked how much they were short for the down payment. There was a pause. She gave me the number. I didn't argue. I didn't ask why they couldn't manage it themselves. I just transferred the money. The day they got the keys, I stood in the empty living room with them. Fresh paint, bare floors, Lauren running from room to room planning furniture, Ethan talking renovations and measurements. I sat on the front step watching, thinking she's safe now. She has a foundation. After that, the calls became familiar. Car trouble, medical bills, job changes. Just this once, Dad. And every time I helped. What I began to notice wasn't the money. It was the silence around it. The calls didn't start with "How are you?" They started with "Dad, we need." No one asked if I was tired. No one asked about my health. No one asked if I needed anything. I was always the solution, never the question. One evening, after sending money again, I sat alone in my armchair staring out the dark window. And for the first time, I didn't feel angry. I felt invisible. I realized something that night, though I didn't dare say it out loud yet. I had spent years building steps for my daughter to climb. And now she was standing on them, looking forward, without ever turning around to see if I was still there. When Lauren told me she was pregnant, my heart nearly gave out right there in the kitchen. I remember the moment clearly. I had just finished making coffee. It was still steaming in the cup when my phone buzzed on the counter. I wiped my hands on a towel and answered without thinking. "Dad," she said, her voice shaking in that way it only did when something big was coming. I leaned against the counter. "What is it, sweetheart?" There was a pause, then she said it. "I'm pregnant." For a second I couldn't speak. The room felt warmer. My chest filled with something soft and bright, something I hadn't felt in years. I laughed, then felt my eyes burn. "Really?" I asked, even though I'd heard her clearly. "Yes," she said. "You're going to be a grandpa." Grandpa. The word sounded strange and wonderful all at once. Like life was opening a new chapter even though I was already near the end of the book. After we hung up, I walked around the house without direction. I opened the refrigerator, closed it, stepped onto the porch, then back inside. I didn't know where to put the happiness. That same week, I went to a baby store downtown. I stood between rows of tiny clothes and pastel blankets, my throat tightening for reasons I couldn't explain. I bought only a few things, the softest ones. I didn't want to overdo it, and I did something else quietly. I opened a small savings account and labeled it with the baby's initials, even though I didn't know the name yet. I transferred a little money into it every month, the same way I once did for Lauren. Not for toys, for opportunities, education, a future. I imagined Sunday dinners, a stroller in the hallway, a small laugh filling the living room. I imagined myself sitting on the floor, clumsy and slow, stacking blocks just to make my grandchild smile. I didn't need to be a fun grandpa, I just wanted to be there. But after the baby was born, something felt wrong. I wasn't invited to the hospital. Lauren said she was tired, said she needed time to recover. I understood. I didn't push. I sent flowers, sent a card, texted short messages just to check in. The replies were brief. Cold, days passed, then weeks. Every time I called, there was a reason. The baby was sleeping. They were busy. The house was a mess. They weren't ready for visitors. I told myself not to overthink it. New motherhood is overwhelming. I didn't want to be that old father who made things harder. Still, something in my chest stayed tight. I started noticing how careful I was becoming, how I chose my words like I was walking on thin ice, how I was afraid of being seen as a burden. One evening during a call, I heard Ethan's voice in the background. Just a few words, a sigh. Lauren's tone changed immediately, quieter, quicker. "Dad, I'll call you back." She didn't. A month went by. I still hadn't seen my grandchild's face. Friends showed me photos of their grandchildren being held in hospital rooms, tears streaming down their faces. I smiled for them, congratulated them, then went home and sat alone in my quiet house, trying to understand what I had done wrong. I kept waiting, kept excusing, kept telling myself love required patience. Then one day Lauren finally called. "You can come over next week," she said. "Around 2. The way she said it felt scheduled, controlled. Like I was booking an appointment. I didn't ask questions. I was afraid the door would close again if I did. I just said, "Yes, thank you." That week, I prepared like it was the most important meeting of my life. And I had no idea that visit would become the moment everything finally fell apart. The day of the visit, I woke up before my alarm. The house was still dark, quiet in that deep way it gets when you've lived alone for a long time. I made coffee out of habit, but my hands were unsteady, so I only took a sip and left the rest behind. My stomach felt tight, like it knew something important was coming before my mind did. I shaved more carefully than usual, chose my clothes slowly, not to impress anyone, but because this mattered to me. Meeting my grandchild felt sacred, even if no one else treated it that way. I packed the gift bag again, even though I'd checked it the night before. The blanket, the small toys, everything neat, everything quiet. I told myself, don't rush, don't overstep, just be grateful you're allowed inside. That thought should have bothered me more than it did. The drive over felt heavy. Not long, just heavy. I watched families at stoplights, kids laughing in back seats, parents turning around to hush them. I felt like I was looking at a world I was supposed to be part of, but somehow wasn't. When I pulled up to the house, I sat in the car for a moment. That house. The one I'd helped them buy. The one I believed I could always walk into without thinking. I took a breath and stepped out. Lauren opened the door. No smile, no warmth. Just a nod. I told myself she's tired. New baby. Don't take it personally. Inside, the house smelled like milk, clean laundry, and sleepless nights. I saw the bassinet in the middle of the living room, placed where you couldn't miss it. My chest tightened instantly. Lauren walked over and lifted the baby. Time slowed. I stepped closer, my voice dropping without thinking. "Hello there," I whispered. "Grandpa's here." I reached my arms out slowly, carefully. I didn't rush. I didn't demand. I just waited, like a man asking permission to belong. Lauren looked at me, then she stepped back, one step, then another. The baby stayed asleep, small and peaceful against her chest. I froze, my arms still raised, not understanding what was happening. I forced a small smile, trying to soften the moment. "I just want to hold the baby for a moment," I said quietly. "I washed my hands." That's when she said it. Her voice wasn't loud, it didn't shake, it was clear, cold, final. "Don't touch my baby." The words hit me so hard I felt them in my spine. For a second I honestly thought I'd misheard. I searched her face, waiting for her to take it back, to say she was stressed, to laugh awkwardly, to explain. She didn't. I turned instinctively toward Ethan. He was standing near the kitchen counter, glass in hand, watching, but not really watching. He didn't move, didn't speak, didn't correct her. His silence felt like agreement. My arms slowly dropped to my sides. I could hear my own heartbeat, the hum of the air conditioner, the clock ticking on the wall like it was marking something permanent. I swallowed and forced a smile so thin it barely existed. "Okay," I said. "All right." I set the gift bag down gently on the table, careful not to make noise. I didn't argue, I didn't ask why, I didn't apologize because I didn't know what I had done wrong. I turned around and walked out. No one followed me. No one called my name. The door closed behind me with a soft click that sounded louder than shouting. I sat in my car with my hands on the steering wheel, staring straight ahead. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I just felt something inside me end, not explode, not shatter, just end. And in that silence a thought formed, clearer than any emotion I'd felt all day. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't stress. This was who I had become to them. And once I understood that, everything else began to change. I didn't drive home right away. I sat there in the car longer than I care to admit, staring through the windshield like the road ahead might explain what had just happened. My hands rested on my thighs, still heavy, like they didn't belong to me anymore. The house stood behind me, quiet and ordinary, the same house I had once believed would always be open to me. That belief died in that driveway. When I finally started the engine, the sound felt too loud. The drive back was silent. No radio, no distractions, just her words repeating in my head, not as an echo but as a fact. "Don't touch my baby." When I reached home, the house greeted me the way it always did, familiar, calm, almost kind. I placed my keys on the small dish by the door and stood there unmoving. The clock ticked. The refrigerator hummed. Life continued as if nothing had happened. I sat down in my armchair and looked around the room. The lamp, the old rug, the photo of Lauren as a child still sitting on the shelf. Everything I had built was here. Everything I had protected was here. And suddenly I understood something I had avoided for years. I had never set a single boundary, not once. I had confused love with endurance. I believed being a good father meant absorbing everything quietly, smiling through discomfort, fixing problems without ever asking to be treated with care. And because I did that so well, they learned something dangerous. They learned I didn't have limits. That night I slept very little, not because I was angry, but because my mind was clear in a way it had never been before. I wasn't replaying arguments. I wasn't imagining confrontations. I was reviewing facts, college tuition, wedding costs, the honeymoon, the house down payment, emergency transfers, late-night calls that ended without a single "Are you okay, Dad?" I wasn't keeping score out of bitterness. I was finally seeing the pattern. The next morning I made one phone call. I called my attorney. His office had handled my affairs for years. The will, the house documents, things you arrange quietly when you start thinking about age and time. I had never revisited it because I never thought I needed to. I told him I wanted to make changes. Immediately, he asked if I was sure. I said yes. When I sat in his office later that week, the room smelled like paper and polished wood. He laid the documents out in front of me and explained everything slowly, professionally. He asked if I was under pressure, if anyone was forcing me. I told him the truth. No one forced me, I said. I'm choosing. I asked him to remove Lauren as the primary heir. He paused just briefly, then asked where I wanted things to go. I had already decided. I redirected my estate to causes that mattered to me. A local community center, a small scholarship fund, people and places where help was appreciated, not expected, where respect still existed. When he asked if I wanted to leave Lauren anything at all, even a symbolic amount, I shook my head. No, I said. I won't reward disrespect. Signing those papers didn't feel dramatic. It felt quiet, like closing a door gently after realizing you'd stayed too long in a room where you weren't welcome. I didn't call Lauren afterward. I didn't announce my decision. I didn't want revenge or reaction. I wanted peace. And for the first time in years, I felt something settle inside me. Clarity, not anger, not hatred. Just the calm understanding that I had finally chosen myself. And that choice was going to change everything. I didn't tell Lauren about the changes I made. I didn't send a message. I didn't explain myself. Some decisions don't need an audience. For the first time in my life, I stopped reaching out first. I stopped checking in just to make sure everyone was okay. I stopped asking if they needed anything. The phone stayed quiet, and so did I at first. Nothing happened. Then the messages started, small at first, casual. Dad, how have you been? We've been busy, I replied politely, briefly. No warmth, no coldness, just enough. Then came the familiar tone. Dad, we're a little tight this month. The car needs repairs. Can you help us just this once? For years, those words would have sent me straight to the bank. This time I stared at the screen for a long moment, then typed 2 words. I can't. The reply came fast, confused, sharp. Why not? You've never said that before. I didn't argue. I didn't explain. I simply didn't move. Weeks passed, then months, and something surprising happened. My life didn't fall apart. It settled. I started spending more time at the local community center. At first, it was just to fill the quiet. Then they asked if I could help teach some kids basic woodworking. Nothing fancy. Just measuring, cutting, building something simple with your hands. The first day, a few kids crowded around the table, curious, unsure. I showed them how to hold the tools safely, how patience mattered more than strength, how mistakes weren't failures, just lessons in disguise. They listened. They smiled. One afternoon, a little boy ran down the hallway when he saw me and shouted, "Grandpa Walter!" I froze. Then I laughed, really laughed, for the first time in a long while. Those kids didn't need my money. They needed my presence. Months later, my phone rang again. It was Lauren. Her voice wasn't calm this time. It was tight, panicked. "What did you do to the will?" she demanded. "Why am I not listed anymore?" I didn't raise my voice. I didn't defend myself. "I changed it," I said simply. She cried. She argued. She apologized too quickly, too late. Promised I could see the baby. Promised things would be different, but I heard the truth beneath it all. She wasn't afraid of losing me. She was afraid of losing what she thought belonged to her. "Lauren," I said quietly, "you wouldn't let me touch my grandchild, so you don't get to touch my legacy." There was silence, then anger, then nothing. I ended the call. Life moved on. I still think about my grandchild sometimes. That ache never fully leaves, but it no longer controls me. I learned something I wish I'd learned sooner. Love without boundaries isn't love. It's self-erasure. Today, my days are calm, purposeful, filled with people who see me, not what I can provide. I give where it's appreciated. I stand where I'm respected. If this story resonated with you, take a second to subscribe and stay with me. Stories like this matter, because too many people are taught to endure disrespect in the name of family. And if you've ever been made to feel small by the people you gave everything to, remember this. Your worth isn't measured by how much you sacrifice, but by how you are treated. You deserve respect,